So what we have here is the sort of riser cupboard feeding a set of flats going up the block. So this is part of the communal system, and so there's a number of these down each of the corridor. And what we've got in here is a number of different services. We can see on the right hand side here the ventilation system. So it's providing the extract air from all the flats. So this is going to say going up to the roof where the main fans are, and we've got a branch off to feed the individual flats on each floor. So there's a fire damper in there which is resettable. If there was a fire, that gives the isolation from the flat at that point. And there's also a control damper that sets the airflow into that flat, but that's all set at commissioning stage and then doesn't need altering any further after that. The silver pipe work in the cupboard then is the heating distribution mainly. So the larger pipes then are the heating flow and return from the district heating from the boiler house downstairs, and then we've got to take off to feed the primary hot water into the HRU cupboard in the flat, and within that then there's isolating valves, so you can actually isolate the flow into those flats from outside the flat. Okay, so again, if they do that, then there'll be no heating in the flat. There might be reasons you'd want to do that, but it'll be locked away obviously in the cupboard anyway, so it can't be interfered with to stop anybody doing it when they shouldn't be doing it. So that's why you can see the smaller pipes coming off there. At the back of the cupboard then we have the boosted cold water. So there's a cold water distribution around all the different flats coming from the main plant room and from the tank room, and you can see the takeoff there and the water meter for the particular flat that's being fed off this particular cupboard. So there's an individual water meter per flat again. Stopcock below that again to turn off the water supply into the residence again, so that's another point of access to stop that external to the unit. In there's a drain point, there's a pressure reducing valve as well, not really maintainable items as such, but there for control of the amount of pressure going into the flat. So it can be adjusted, but doesn't, once it's commissioned, it shouldn't need changing again. The other bit in there then again is the soil pipe. So this is taking all the wastewater away from the flats, the bathrooms, the kitchens and the sinks in there. And you'll find a common setup with variations in how it's laid out in the cupboard outside each flat. So this riser, if you like, flow and return from the heating, is feeding all the flats at this point in the building, if you like. So it goes vertical upwards and then feeds the flats on all the different floors. Okay, so if there's a problem in this riser, all the flats in that column will have an issue, as they would with the ventilation if there was a problem with that sort of side of it. So, but you know, if this one, the water flow in this one fails, it won't affect the flats on that side of the corridor. They'll still get their heating.
Corridor lighting is provided by the colo lights that are fitted down the corridors. They're an LED light fitting with a very exceptionally long life cycle. They do not have any user changeable parts. It's a case that you swap out the whole unit, but realistically, on the life cycles for this equipment, you're looking 10 to 12 years before any work needs to be done. The savings to electricity over that course of time are calculated so that it covers the cost of the replacement of the equipment. The lighting is controlled via PIRs located at various junctions along the corridor so that they pick people up either leaving their dwelling, coming out of the lifts or through the stair core. It's a simple switch mechanism with a timer, and once the timer's expired, the light will go off. So there's adequate time for people to walk down the corridor, go into their dwelling, and then at some point after they've shut the door, the lights will go off. The fire detection system within the building, not including the flats, falls into two types of system. We've got the system within the circulation areas and the system within the car park areas. The car park is an entity all of its own, and we should really talk about that separately. But within the residential demise, we have a number of these devices. They're smoke detectors. They will detect smoke when it reaches a particular level, and they will activate the fire alarm system. Upon an activation of the fire alarm system, several things happen. One of those things that happen is that this venting system will open. The venting system will allow the smoke from that floor to be cleared to allow people clear access and egress, and allow the fire brigade services clear access and egress. We will talk in more depth about the way that the communal systems work, but for this part, that's suffice to say. There is not an audible alarm at this level. The strategy is that in the event of general fire situations, people stay within their dwellings and are evacuated by the fire brigade. You know when a smoke head is active because the LED on the side of it, it turns red and it pulses. Also, the fire alarm panel will tell you the device number, device location, and device floor, so that you can... What is the greatest problem in communal buildings is nuisance tripping by persons unknown, who have a malicious, maybe they're smoking, maybe they're doing malicious activities, maybe they're just having a bit of a laugh. And it causes building managers a lot of problems. But the way that the systems are now designed and built, you can tell exactly where it is, and then you can target the offenders.
Right, what we've actually got here is a remote meter reader so that we can actually record what the tenant's usage is on their heating and the hot water, and it saves someone coming round, knocking on the door, asking you what your meter reading is. It can all be done remotely throughout the building, and then all the information is gathered and then sent down to the people who actually release the bills for them. Works on a radio frequency, and each of the meters has got a little radio module in there so that it actually goes in, grabs all of the information so that it's accurately billed for the amount of energy that you use within your apartment. So what it is each of the apartments has a heat exchange unit which controls the hot water and the central heating. And what this does is within that there's a module that actually releases the information down to the tablet that I've got in my hand, and all of that information is actually encrypted so that no one else can actually see it apart from the people that are actually releasing the bills for you.
Okay, each floor is fed from a rising main. The rising main comes up from the main LV as we looked at earlier. This board has no user interface. It is purely for access by UK Power Network, UK Power Solutions, one of the network providers, not the meter providers, network providers. This is the way that they demand that the systems are set out. From here, and there is a fuse for each flat, we then have a set of tails, as we call them, that run up then through the meter, through an isolator, to a secondary isolator. E.ON, who provided the metering here, insisted that they have their own isolator switch. The rules of the Electrical Council state that I have to have an electrical isolation point, so we end up with a duplication, and that's all it is. If for any reason your supply is withdrawn, i.e. non-payment of bills, etc., that would be done from that point there, and this switch would be disconnected. That's really the only time that anyone needs to know what's in here. If there's a serious issue within the flat, and it would have to be very, very serious, for example, the consumer unit becoming on fire or basically blowing up, then for no other reason would you ever come to here, and this is where that can be isolated from. It carries a fuse. So if anyone puts a nail or a cable, puts a nail or a screw through the cable that runs between here and the flat, this fuse will blow. This is really part of the maintenance package. It has nothing to do with the homeowner. The homeowner will have no connection with this room whatsoever, no access to it at all. The only people that are really coming in here would be maintenance electricians to look at this and outgoing, and the meter reader who will come to this place to read the meters. The meters are read by some sort of smart meter device, handheld device, but that's not part of our remit. There are bonding connections, as you can see along the bottom. Again, they're the same as the safety connections we've seen within the flat, but as this area is not meant for non-skilled trained persons, then the same warning signs don't appear, because a skilled trained person knows what they should and shouldn't be doing, and they're the only people who will be allowed access into here. We're going to talk about the aerial and satellite system that runs throughout the building. It's based upon a backbone system, which is these cables here. These cables run from the satellite dishes and the horizontal and vertical antenna located on the roof down through the building. As they travel down, they reach these devices. These are multiplexers. So what that simply means is we take 1 to 5 signals in and generate 5 times the amount of dwellings that we then feed out to. So we're multiplying, hence the word multiplex. There is nothing that the homeowner or the tenant needs to deal with here. This is purely dealt with by initially our maintenance team and later the building maintenance team. Each one of the outlets that we've seen within the flat comes from a single feed cable. There's no splitters, there are no amplifiers or multiplexers within the flats. Everything is done here. So we amplify the signal, we split, we multiplex the signal. And then we run a single cable then to an outlet within the flat. And as I say, there's absolutely nothing for anyone to maintain here. Should the units fail to operate, you call us, we deal with it. It's very, very unlikely. This system we've been installing in many applications for quite some years now, and hotels all over the country have got these multiplexers, and they're very, very reliable. Okay, this is the main intake room. What that means is that those 2 cables come from the residential supply transformer located in London Road. That's non-accessible to anyone who's not from UKPN. And it is metered at that location by UKPN or the meter supplier. That power then comes into this unit and is outputted on those 2 cables, one of which goes to residential riser 1, one goes to residential riser 2. We then saw that rising cable going into the grey boxes with the meters attached to them on each floor. The fuses in here are not maintained, do not have a maintenance regime, are not a maintainable item, and do not generally get accessed by anyone other than an authorised person. That is someone who's authorised in the sense of UK Power Networks, someone who carries the NERS accreditation, or one of our appointed engineers. So that's it. There's really nothing else to say about that unit after that. This is the Landlord Services Board. It's fed from the same supply but via a separate metering solution. This is an E.ON metering solution, and all of the landlord services are fed from here. So as we look through, we can see automatic vent system, lift 2, lift 1, the distribution boards that are scattered throughout the buildings, all labelled up, and the name, you'll find the name on the front of the board wherever it's located. You can find the reference here, and behind here where the MCCBs are contained, there's also going to be a reference which tells you that that is the device that meets with that meter, which also references the circuit number that's on the cable above. And really, there's nothing in here, again, that's user serviceable. It will need to be maintained. Whoever the service contract ongoing is with, the electricians will come in, and once a year they'll want to test the buttons on the devices, very much like we did in the flat. But these devices are only to be operated by authorised persons. This whole room is not a store cupboard, it's not an area where people mingle. It's only for people who have the appropriate qualifications to work on this equipment. Adjacent to every piece of equipment is a means of isolation. So the lifts have an isolator. The AOVs have an isolator. If you're doing a maintenance task on that piece of equipment, you expect to find an isolator within 1 metre, as the crow flies, as it were, and that's your safe point of isolation. You isolate from there and you padlock off, and that's you safe to work on that piece of equipment. If, however, the supply network cables have an issue, then an electrician who's responsible for the site, so in the first year that's us, will isolate from this point, again using the lock off and tag method. Everyone has to use lock and tag because that's the only authorised method of isolation. There are a number of these units around the building. They're called ATS switches, which stands for Automatic Transfer Switch. What happens is this. On the one side, you'll see that it says mains available on load. On the other side of it, it says generator available on load. That will be changed to secondary supply. The firefighting lift will have one of these in the riser cupboard adjacent to the lift. In the event that, for example, a fire has rendered the primary supply unavailable, the sensor inside here says, right, that supply is no longer available to me. Because it's a live fire safety system, because the fireman's lift has to work in the event of a fire, it will then switch to the secondary system. It's fully automatic. Once the primary supply has been re-energised, it will flip back automatically, should the cable be suitable to do so. The cables are fire-rated cables, so they stand up to an awful lot of fire before they melt through. But really, this is part of the maintenance regime, and we would expect that certainly once every 6 months and definitely once a year, it's tested to ensure that everything changes over. And that's really it. And as I say, I think there's 4 of them in different parts of the building, 3 of them in different parts of the building.